Perfect. Good evening. Welcome everybody to the November 10th Budget Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next on our agenda is public input. Do we have anyone here for public input?
One at a time.
All right, I'll close public input. Review or additions to tonight's agenda. I want to thank Mr. Hayes for pointing out that I had us a year ahead, and the agenda that I sent out was November 10th, 2023. So I'll make sure we get that corrected.
What's that trying to say about this year?
It's a great question.
He's thinking about next year.
I did just want to point out that I did flip-flop school business and town business from the way we normally do our cadence. We'll do school business tonight first for the questions with the school district, and then we'll go to town business after that. All right, correspondence. We have a good amount of correspondence, and my apologies for not sending this over earlier today, but I'll make sure everyone gets it this evening. I want to start with, on October 28th, Crystal and Andy Fosters of 24 Cutler Road wrote the committee over concerns about cutting the school district's special education budget. They've seen great progress by their adoptive children with the school's special education team. They urge the committee to match the commitment of our educators and support them with the budget they deserve to serve our youth effectively. Removing special education staff and paraprofessionals would not only be a failure to the children, but will also put our district at legal risk. On October 28th, Ms. Hirschberger forwarded the school board agendas and related information for their budgeting meetings on November 1st and November 3rd. On October 29th, Mr. Sullivan shared the minutes from the October 27th meeting. On October 30th, Ms. Hirschberger notified the committee that the November 1st and November 3rd school board meetings would be held at the fire station. On October 31st, Ms. Hirschberger also shared an updated superintendent budget with the committee. On October 31st, we received a letter from Tara and Bob Keating of 20 Center Court, and they had asked that that be read into our minutes, so I'm going to take just a minute and read the letter that they asked. It has come to our attention that the Budget Committee is considering drastic cuts to the Litchfield School Education Department. Our understanding is that any non-filled paraprofessional spots will be cut, along with 2 special education teachers, one at CHS and one at LMS. As special education parents, we are very disappointed to hear that this is an item slated to be discussed and possible cuts to be made to the special ed department. Special education is a federal protected program. These types of drastic changes and cuts to the special education program will only open the town and district to possible legal suits when special education services cannot be met and fulfilled due to these cuts. These paras and teachers are the educational support our special education children need to succeed in school and in life. To take these paras and teachers away from them will cause setbacks to these children in our town. We encourage the Budget Committee to go to the schools and observe how much these teachers and paras do for our children. We urge the Budget Committee and the school board to take a hard look at the school district budget as a whole and make decisions based on items that will not cause detrimental harm to our special education program and special education students. We are all aware of the school district's budget's crisis. A special education program is not a program that should ever be looked at to be cut or diminished to solve a bigger issue in the district. We thank you for your time in this manner. Best regards, Bob and Tara Keating, 20 Center Court, Litchfield, New Hampshire. Moving back to our correspondence, on November 3rd, Mr. Sun shared the agenda for the November 10th meeting. November 7th, Mr. Cutter shared the most recent school board budget, along with his analysis that cross-references budget lines by type versus separated department. And then finally, on November 9th, Ms. Hirschberger reminded the committee of the invitation to tour the LMS renovations with the School Facilities Improvement Committee. All right. And with that, I will move to review and acceptance of minutes from our last meeting, which was on October 27th.
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
A motion by Mr. Bork.
I'll second it, but
We did see
were you
those
able to
changes.
correct that one thing
Yep.
that I had?
Yep.
Okay, got it.
And a second by Ms. Hirschberger. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That carries 7-0-0. All right. So next on our agenda is going into our school budget review. And before we get started this evening, I want to kind of just recap where we are in our process, what we've done up to this point, and really the purpose of tonight's meeting, our meeting on the 17th, and our schedule moving forward. So just so everyone's aware, last week on November 1st and November 3rd, the Budget Committee was invited to attend the school board meetings, and those were sessions where school district staff presented the budget to the school board. School board had an opportunity to ask questions, and as well as the Budget Committee had an opportunity to ask questions. The school board took action and made some motions on the 3rd and made some cuts to the budget that's being presented to us tonight. And then our purpose and the way we've structured our meetings for the next few weeks, tonight and the 17th, are for us to ask questions that we have of the school district staff. We're not going to be taking any motions or making any motions until after Thanksgiving on December 1st. The way we're going to structure this is very similar to the way we did last year, which I think proved to be fairly effective. If you notice, joining us tonight are Dr. Jetty and Mr. Totten, our business administrator. They're here to help answer questions that we have. Any questions that they're not able to immediately answer, for example, let's say we have a question specifically around something at GMS, Mr. Mitchell isn't here, we've utilized that Google Doc again, just like we did last year. Those questions will be captured, and it'll be an opportunity for Mr. Mitchell or other staff to answer those questions this evening or tomorrow so that we can get those responses as quickly as possible. Okay, so we'll ask questions tonight. Our goal for tonight is to go through the budgets that were presented essentially in the same format that the school district did it. So we will go through GMS, LMS, CHS, food service, HR, and then food service salaries and general fund salaries. I will mention, I mentioned this to Dr. Jetty last night at school facilities. If we find ourselves ahead of schedule, which doesn't happen often in these meetings, but perhaps we might look to knock out a few of the items from the 17th that are a little shorter in nature, like school board, SAU, or transportation. If we can knock some of those out tonight, time permitting, that might shorten our evening on the 17th as well. But we'll play that by ear when we get there. Any questions on kind of our flow, our process for tonight or the next few weeks before we get started?
Does everybody have the link to that document that you referenced? Because I don't
The Google
think I
Doc?
do.
I shared it about 6:45.
Oh, I have not checked
Yep.
my email. Thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome. I had just created it, and I had put a couple of sample questions
Okay.
in there myself that I had just to get
So
things
you
started.
created it.
I did,
Dr.
yes.
Jetty, do you and the team
It was
have
shared
access?
with us,
Okay,
Yeah, I
and
you
did.
I
got it.
shared it with
Okay.
the admin team.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
alright.
Thank
I
you.
shared it with the two of them, and
Okay,
they shared it with the
perfect.
rest of the admin team.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Any other questions on our process or flow? Okay. So again, we will start with GMS tonight. We'll go through the GMS as an opportunity for us to go line by line and ask questions that we have. Anything that Mr. Totten or Dr. Jetty are able to answer, they can do that for us this evening. If they're not, we'll capture those in the Google Doc. So let's, I guess before we do that, Dr. Jetty or Mr. Totten, I didn't know if there was anything you all wanted to, I know we don't want to rehash the presentation. That's kind of, we want to try to be as efficient as possible, but any high-level comments you want to make about GMS before we jump in with questions?
So what we thought might be helpful, because even though we've all sat in a meeting, we've listened to the principal, and we've seen the slides, not everybody in the viewing public is going to make that connection back. So somebody who's coming in to just watch a budget committee meeting is going to miss a little bit of that background. So we thought it may be helpful if we just comment quickly on what the principal posted as their key talking points, and then we can go right into the budget after that. So if that works for the budget committee.
Recap what the changes were that the school board made as well. I have some of them.
If there were any in that budget. There were
Yeah.
quite a few that were not touched, but that's a
Yeah.
really good point. Because you have a summary of all the changes, right?
I do.
Okay.
Yep.
So we
Thank
can
you.
definitely hit that. So for Griffin, basically, the budget is really coming in relatively flat. If you go to the last page, you'll see that Principal Mitchell has reduced his budget by $3,385. That did not change through any school board action. His key budget drivers are that he has decreased based on the enrollment projections that we had, so there will be fewer students accurate for next year is our prediction, so you are multiplying all the supply costs, et cetera, by a lower number. That results in savings. He also has taken a really close look at the programs that they're running and then the supplies that they have used and the orders that they have made. There are a couple of lines that have increased, so there's a 3 to 5% rate increase that he applied due to shipping costs, so, and just inflationary costs also. So he is predicting, even though he'll be buying fewer supplies, they're just gonna cost more, as we've all experienced at home. He also has a couple of key programs where there are some lines up, and we can address those when we hit those, and a few necessary items. So overall, he's down, but he is paying attention to the inflationary experience that we're all going through at this time.
Questions around the GMS budget?
I have a quick question, actually. Now I'm thinking about it. Tara's favorite subject of furniture. We absolutely have to replace furniture. I totally get that. When we do buy furniture like that, though, are we thinking? I know long term the goal was to have a new elementary school. When we buy classroom furniture, are we thinking about, okay, it's going to fit in the new school as well, or would that be completely outfitted and new, or I guess how do you think about stuff like that?
In planning for the new school, at this time, the intent is to furnish the school with new furnishings.
Okay.
But exactly where that's gonna land relative to like classroom desks.
Yeah.
We're not gonna throw away 1 or 2 year old desks, to get something new. So that's not gonna happen. But you are certainly purchasing casework and, shelving units and all of that stuff would be, brought there. We would not be bringing old, well-lived furniture up the hill, if you would. So the intent is that we would, keep what we can.
Okay.
And there would be some new. So the furniture that he's planning for, and, we've really tapped the brake on furniture because we're like, go examine the closet, see what you have. But a lot of this stuff is just not safe and does need to be replaced. So that has been discarded. It's like, don't hang on to something that's not safe. And let's make sure we're buying smart.
And on furniture, he mentioned something about in the past they bought furniture that wasn't quite, would have a long life. And he's buying something different, a little bit more sturdy. Did he just start doing that this year or last year?
It's been, so what we've realized is we have like particle board desks that are delaminating. So, if all of a sudden the rubber edging gets off and then the top is lifting up, and you duct tape it down, you can only do that so long before you just have to get rid of that table and get something safer for the kids. And so then you're examining, it costs less to buy that type of furniture, but you don't get the same life out of it. So we are trying to be smart about using the dollars. So saving a few pennies, if it just costs you that much more in the long run, isn't worthwhile.
Can I pause and just pass these around? These are new sections that I was given like a week ago at the, there's only 5 copies though, so I will need to get you more. So there's 2 sections that need to be revised. One is the curriculum. So these sections just replace what's in there currently. That's curriculum.
Was that because of the lines that moved? Is that why these were replacing these, or were there other changes?
I don't remember.
I believe it's the
Remember?
lines that move, no
Okay.
changes within the lines. They were just looking to
Moved
put
Personnel, I think.
personnel, kind of encompass lines less than 270 and non-personnel 270 and up. So
Okay, 'cause
to
I
move-
think I
to move
printed
PD
those out.
into the non-personnel side was one of the main goals.
Okay, then I think I printed these out,
So
actually. 'cause I thought
curriculum
I-
goes after GMS if you have that in order. And then this one, revised S&B. That's, yeah, that's what I would think.
That's correct.
First one's
Seen that
curriculum.
long though. What?
First one's curriculum.
Yes.
Yes. And then the second one, it just, S&B general fund. Goes after FS salaries.
Salaries and benefits. That's what it is.
Okay, I'm like.
Yeah.
why
Oh,
is there an
thank
and?
you. I'm like,
Salaries and
what?
benefits.
Yeah.
Was that, yeah, I knew it was HR.
that whole section.
Are these the ones we got at the last, meeting?
No.
The two piles were there?
You know
I
what?
believe
Michelle
so.
probably had, yeah, so if
Yeah.
you came, you probably have them then, yes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Some people weren't there on the first, so if you weren't there on the
Exactly.
We
first,
don't-
you would.
Okay.
If we got the new ones, we don't need these.
okay, yeah, so that's probably
You
why
may
I only
have
have
not gotten
five.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
I remember the one page and that one food service.
I knew I missed it.
All right. So
So
if you were
these
there
go
on the,
after FS salaries, if you have.
You were there at the
them.
last,
if you were there on the
Yep.
first, you should have gotten these.
Yep.
I think
Yeah. you just-
Mr. Hayes may need it.
Does anybody?
You printed it off. I got it. I got them that evening as well. Yeah.
Okay,
I'll hold on to these for Scott.
okay, thank you,
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, Scott wasn't there, so save those for him, please. I do have a question, and I feel like I may get in trouble for asking this because my wife runs this. Scarecrow Jamboree. What are the supplies that are used for that on GMS's side? Because I know like the PTO does a lot of that. Do we?
Where is it in the budget? Which line?
It's under supplies, 610. Student activities,
GMS.
Which
page 5, about a third of the way down.
The PTO doesn't
There
do
it
the
is.
scarecrow. It's the school that runs the scarecrow.
Right, but well, yeah, but I mean,
But you're right, I don't know.
I don't know
what
what the
supplies
supplies
go
are
to.
because I don't know what supplies are. Oh, maybe that's what it is, the ribbons and stuff.
Yeah, I can double check that with Dan, but my hunch is that it's not
where is it?
the pumpkins and the
Page 5,
scarecrows and
16.
all
Probably,
that stuff.
you're right, it's probably like the ribbons and
recognition.
prizes
610,
and
yeah.
stuff. Okay.
Still don't see it.
Are there signs that are posted? Is there a brochure? I didn't make it this year, but,
There's flyers and stuff that go home.
so my gut is that's what they're,
Okay.
That is what it's for, and I can tell you in the past that I've reduced this particular line a couple of times, and that's basically what it is. It's the gifts and the little giveaways that they do, and it's basically down to like,
Bare
they
bones.
spend what they have, yeah.
Other questions for GMS?
So here's a-
Okay. Let's move to LMS.
Just says Litchfield, just says Litchfield.
LMS, while Dr. Jetty's pulling that up, LMS had an overall increase of $353 from last year.
It actually changed at the last
Yeah,
meeting.
it changed to,
$59.
it's only
Oh,
59,
that's
yeah.
right, she did reduce that.
Yeah, so on page 1, there was,
Reduction.
whenever you go into this program, it's good, but there's a lot of save. Different times you have to save as well, so if you miss it, it just doesn't save it as you want to. So it should have said 348 students, and that total for supplies, for the classroom supplies, should have been
355, yeah.
14,616, which was a reduction of 294.
so her budget, as you said, is up only $59. And the decreases are, again, reviewing all the programs and supplies that are used and ordered. She removed underutilized software subscriptions. You'll see a couple of spots in the budget where that's been removed. Also, Scholastic News subscriptions were removed to be replaced with online resources. So no longer getting the paper Scholastic News, but online resources. And internal creation and printing for promotion and end-of-year certificates. So the school's historically given plaques out, but we've learned not everybody values the plaques, so we're going to switch it over to an online certificate that we can print. For increases, again, supplies are up due to cost of materials. The art budget, the new staff member in the art department intends to use the kiln. Hasn't been serviced in a long time. It needs to be serviced to make sure it's safe to use, so that's in there. The music budget last year was cut because the supplies in music were labeled as PPE, and it really wasn't a leftover. I think that was a note that didn't get updated. So they're restoring the music budget back to what it should be to outfit the band and the chorus and the general music classes. For the science budget, we have new staff who are tasked with implementing hands-on activities in the classroom, and that hands-on approach is going to require additional supplies for labs. And so that is reflected in the budget. And then finally, reading education has increased because we need to purchase some materials to address recognized areas of need. So if you take a look at state testing data, and especially after the pandemic, The testing data is indicating that there are some additional resources that would be helpful to make sure that our students are improving on their reading scores. So Ms. Grantham has tried to include those in this budget.
Questions about LMS?
This is more just curiosity. Why was the groceries moved from family and consumer science to world languages?
Yeah, so Family Consumer Sciences, we struggled with hiring a teacher after the person retired. There are no programs in New Hampshire that are certifying teachers in Family and Consumer Sciences.
Okay.
We had difficulty hiring somebody at the high school 2 years ago. We tried to hire at the middle school and we came up empty-handed. So knowing that the students needed a UA to fill that time slot in their schedule, the proposal was to expand Spanish and to make sure that our students were getting an earlier jump start on Spanish. That's why what used to be used for supplies and facts are now Family and Consumer Sciences. Sorry, I'm acronyming on you. They're now moved over to world language to cover supplies. But I don't think it's a one-to-one move. I think it's a little bit less.
It might be. I don't know. I just thought it was weird.
Yeah, but that's why that move occurred.
Okay.
Well, I feel like that's a perfect example of why the school needs to have the flexibility to be able to make adjustments as conditions arise. And so you're going to be hearing more about those this year. There's quite a few different areas of realignment, and I just think that that's a good example of how that has to happen.
So, staying with, building off of Derek's comment and question, when I look at world languages, supplies, 400, 0, 400, and now it's 3,200. Is that, I mean, I understand why supplies are no longer under family consumer science, but that seems like a really big jump for world languages.
So to that point, sorry, I'm trying to get logged in here.
And this is at the bottom of page 1, top of page 2 for LMS.
So the approach that we're taking with the world languages is completely different. The former world language program was sort of the traditional approach that we probably experienced if we took a world language in school, where there's kind of worksheets and grammar approach that goes into learning the second language. They're implementing what's called the OWL approach, or an organic world language approach, and it's much more about the way we learned our native language of English, which is, think about how you teach a toddler. It's repetition, it's verbal, it's reinforcement, it's activity-based, it's play-based, it's games and that sort of thing. And then later on, you begin to write the language and work on the grammar and do the other stuff. So they're taking a completely different approach, and it requires different resources in order to do that. So when you walk into a classroom today, you would see students standing around, interacting with each other verbally. They actually have pushed the desk, or they've taken the desk right out of the room. There are no desks in the room. It's on their feet, it's all interactive, and it's all verbal, with some reinforcement of materials to go along with that. So again, the facts reduction I'm showing was $4,700, and the increase to the world languages was $2,800. So it was a savings, it wasn't a direct transfer, and it's a whole new approach. So that sort of explains why that has occurred.
So will that be startup cost, or is that supposed to be an annual expense? Like if you have to buy games and whatnot, those would be potentially one-time things. So is this a startup or?
I think it could be annual and ongoing, because there will be more consumables in that room. You'll notice that it's all under supplies, and it's all under consumables, 2 classes, so we doubled the number of teachers. And it will also involve, so here's the tricky part. You can't hire a facts teacher, so you can't send students to family and consumer science class, but the state minimum standards of teaching family and consumer sciences are still there. So you'll notice that in the note it says world language cooking. So there will be a Spanish cooking activity that teaches the FACS standards that we're required to teach, and it'll be incorporated into that class. So it's gonna be different, and it's not just gonna be microwave nachos, so you've gotta, you gotta have the budget to back up what you need to do.
If, and I don't know if Jen could do this, or maybe the world languages teacher, I would just like to see like what specific supplies are they getting there, right? Like, a lot of these other areas, have fairly specific detail about what they're buying with supplies, and this one just, it doesn't have as much there.
We'll ask that question to figure out what their plan is, but honestly, it is a new program with 2 new teachers, so there's a certain amount of, we know we have to interact, we know that we're gonna have to go to the cooking lab, we know, but I'm not sure that they have actually drilled into a specific list yet, but let me ask that question. Thank you.
Do you want me to start writing some of these questions in the document?
Sorry,
Should
would
I
be
do that
so-
role?
I was just about to say, that would be wicked helpful, so,
Okay.
yes, please.
Okay, and there was another question I thought before that, I'm not sure.
And I think part of it that goes along with it, what you were just talking about, is I know like a few years back that we cut the budget as far as for food for the Spanish teacher, and that's when we had a fax teacher. Now you don't have a fax teacher and you have 2 Spanish teachers, so now the cooking is increased, and I'm sure that's where you'll find a lot of this money is just gonna be in foods, because before the Spanish teacher used to cook a lot, and we said, well, we have a fax class, is really, you don't need to expand that much as far as in the cooking part of it.
Other questions for LMS?
So what supplies will comprise the $2,400, is that?
Yeah, of
Good question.
610 for world languages.
Yep, that's world language, 610, yeah.
This is small, but this laminating machine, is that like an automatic one or something? $300 just seems like a lot for laminating.
Where is that, Kate? Which,
It's the very first line for the LMS budget, the repairs and maintenance. I would think you could just buy a couple new laminators at that cost.
so the laminator's actually, it's a big piece of equipment.
Okay, so it's more industrial than,
It is. I haven't seen the one at LMS, but the one at GMS would fit on this tabletop. It's not a little tiny thing. And then you have big rolls of laminating material that go in. It heats up and it sort of melts the plastic together so that the paper is laminated.
Okay.
And elementary and middle school teachers love laminating things because then once it's done, they have it for the next year.
Yeah.
So it ends up being cost effective in the long run because you get more than 1 year out of it. So it is a
Okay.
pretty industrial piece of equipment.
makes sense. And then I was curious about, the piano tuning costs are just different between, the 3 schools? Is it just because of the different type of piano?
Yes.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I swear I've heard that question before.
Heard them all. They're different pianos.
They also, so the piano has to be tuned, I mean, technically, every time it gets moved, it should be tuned, but at the high school, it tends to stay put, where LMS, they're all over the place. They're in the cafeteria, they're in the gym, and so,
Okay. That was all I had. They were
These
just
both
small
new
things.
teachers in this program for the world languages,
they're both experienced teachers, but they are new to Litchfield.
new to Litchfield. And are they new positions?
The Spanish at the middle school, we had a Spanish program, and then again, we expanded this year by adding a second Spanish teacher by replacing the fax teacher. So it's not a new position, it was a flexible swap off of what was available for hiring. So 1 less fax, 1 additional Spanish. And remember, last year, we went without Spanish. We were not able to hire a Spanish teacher at the high school, and so we transferred the middle school Spanish teacher and went a year without Spanish at the middle school. So, but this is not a catch-up. This will be a permanent shift in what we teach.
Other question? oh, go
Does everyone take Spanish now?
I believe all grades, let me double check that, Derek, to make sure, but I believe they all will get an exposure now.
Anything else for LMS? move to CHS. Dr. Jetty, I'll let you give a high-level update on this one.
Thank you for that. And now that I'm connected to the internet, can you believe I left the office and left my budget binder sitting on the table? I'm like, I drove all the way down there. I'm like, sorry, that's why I was a few minutes late getting back. So for Campbell High School, Principal Hess it's his first budget, so he's brand new to us. He has an increase of $16,045 is the bottom line. Did that hold after
Yep,
school
it did.
board? It did.
Yep.
There's an increase of $1,542 in regular ed programs. He also has an increase of $12,581 in CTE. Remember, CTE is our ability to send students out to regional career tech ed centers. So that is Alvern, that is Pinkerton, and that is Manchester School of Technology. Those are the three that we're currently have students enrolled in. But if there was a program in Salem or somewhere else that was specific to a student's needs, we are also obligated to meet that need. And also a reminder to the Budget Committee that last year I helped the committee to understand that even though there are tuition dollars that we pay out for these programs, because those programs are supported by federal funds, the cost to educate a child in those programs is less than it is to educate in a seat at Campbell High School. So the tuition ends up being a really good bargain because the student gets a highly personalized program, and it's usually the type of program that a student will say, I come to school because of auto tech. I come to school because of studying a computer program course at MST. And the cost is cheaper than it is to educate in-house. And then for athletics, there are some increases that amount to $5,250, and those are mainly related to safety, so some additional inspection of, say, football helmets and equipment that just needs to be done. And also travel expenses mainly related to coaches, not to coaches, to referees. So those refs have asked for, and their association have asked for increased fees for travel for the folks who come out to ref, because they're now traveling and paying higher prices at the pump like we all are, and so that's been passed on to member schools.
Questions for CHS? The CTE increase, can you just recap why that's going up 12,500?
So that is, which page is that one?
It is page 13, about the middle of that page.
So if you look at FY '22 actual expenditures, we spent $56,661, and so we are requesting that amount in our budget. So it was reduced, actually, I think it was a Budget Committee action last year that reduced the amount. But as you can see, the students are there, they're participating in those programs, so we just level funded it to this year's expenses. It's always a prediction of how many students will sign up, how many will be admitted, how many will then follow through on that admittance. But if you look at 2 years ago in 2020, it was $57,398 in actual expenses, so we feel that $56,661 is more realistic to current student needs.
Doug, do you have a current year-to-date on where we are with CTE for FY '23?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, and maybe in addition to that, with the number that was cut last year, I guess the question would be, did we have kids that wanted to participate that were not able to? Or the amount that was funded, did that allow any student that wanted to participate in those CTE courses at Alvern or wherever to do so?
So I will say we did not deny anybody based on the budget.
Okay.
To be clear, if there was a student accepted, they're going, we'll find the money somewhere else.
Okay.
Tara, if you could put on the
I
note.
got it.
'Cause
Current year-to-date on CTE.
What I'll pull is the exact enrollment in all the various programs, what the tuition rate is. We'll do simple math, because even the year-to-date, they bill, I want to say quarterly, So that might not be reflective. We'll calculate
I
exactly
think we had
what
that
will
last
cost.
year. I remember Mr. Taylor asking for that, so that, yeah, that'd be helpful.
We'll get that for you.
Was the 21 drop an anomaly? Was that because of COVID?
So I'm thinking it was. It also could be, it could be a cohort function. So just that group of students wasn't as motivated to go off to somewhere else. But I think, we have to remember that that was returning to school in fall of 2020. We were one of the only schools that opened right out of the gate. So I'd have to go back and figure out, were the other schools even receiving students in person, or was it go to school at Campbell and then do CTE remotely, which our students may have just said, nah. So we can research that a little bit further. I think your better numbers personally are the pre-pandemic number of 57.
Yeah.
And last year's as back to normal as it was gonna get number.
Other questions for CHS?
I actually have two for athletics. One of them might fall in buildings and grounds, but I couldn't find it there either. And that's porta potty rentals.
What page is that, Brian?
It's not on any page, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a really good
That is a
question.
good question, yeah.
I may have missed in buildings and grounds too, but I couldn't find it there either. And I only bring it up because it was brought up as far as for the town, because they have a new vendor right now that they're
Yeah.
saving money on. That the soccer league is also gonna use, because they are less expensive, and he's actually a local owner here in town. So that's the first one. The other is there a reason why you change all the coaches' stipends to just a lump sum, so we can't see the individuals and positions and names?
I think, so we can get you the actual amounts, because the collective bargaining agreement lists all those.
Right.
But I think for budgeting purposes, it is done as a lump.
Right,
And
because they've
then
always done it,
dispersed back out.
they've always been broken out by sport and the stipend position.
But we can get that for
You
you
want
because
stipends by sport.
by sport.
Yes, it's true.
And they list the coaches, they list the positions.
Okay.
Because we've run into the situation where, yes, it's in the collective bargaining, but it hasn't been filled for like 2 or 3 years, and then like,
That's same with LMS too, it's
Yeah.
the same way in LMS, it's the one group.
It's not even a sport though, because when they have stipends for like
whatever the stipends are, we used to have a
student
list.
council, this all sorts of
Stipends by
stipends.
co-curriculum.
Yeah.
So we have really tightened up on that. As part of collective bargaining, there's a subcommittee that meets after, so there's a dollar amount that's determined, and then a subcommittee goes back, and we've reviewed the list twice now, the last 2 CBAs, and eliminated unfilled positions, because it's in nobody's interest to have money sitting there just hanging out. The only time something was carried forward is if there was a reason why it was unfilled. I'm trying to think of an example from the list, but there were a couple that were carried forward. But for the most part, we have eliminated those, and then we've also honored new clubs and activities that have started. So there's a whole process in the CBA that we follow.
Okay,
But we'll get that for you.
thank you.
Other questions for CHS?
And I think it's just a good catch on the porta potties. I mean, I don't have the whole thing memorized, but I don't remember a porta
I
potty
searched
being
for it
in
in
the
the soft
budget
copy, and I
at
didn't see
all
it.
either.
I did too, yeah, I just did the same thing. Yeah.
I tried all the different variations.
I looked in facilities
Chemical,
too. I didn't
toilets,
see it.
portal.
All right, did you catch that?
I feel like I saw it, but I don't see it right now, so I don't know what it is.
You want to
Make
capture
sure
that
that's on our
question?
list.
Is that
Yeah,
what
make
you
sure
wanna-
it's on
Yeah,
our
I got it.
list.
Oh, yes, I
Thank
got
you.
it. Porta potties, question mark.
My hunch is it's not called out in the budget. I mean, obviously, we're paying for it, but
Other questions for CHS? Okay.
I just had a quick question on the,
There it is. 442.
just the regular education
Page
610 supplies. That jumped, fiscal year
$2,000.
2023, the approved budget. Is that just because moving different things, from other supply lines? Because the actual expenditures in 2022 was only 7,600, and we're at 16,000 for
So what page are you
budget.
on?
So,
Page one.
page 1, 610, supplies. So I'm thinking it's because things got absorbed into this line that came from other lines.
so when I look at the numbers there, I mean, the one that stands out is the 7,600. Just seems artificially low. I can't answer why that's so low, but the amount they're asking for, I mean, Principal Hess did decrease that by $670 in his request. That's an enrollment driven. You notice he's multiplying by 394 students. But Kate, I'm not really sure why that went down.
Can you restate that again so I can put that as a question? I got that it was supplies. I just,
It was on page 1, line 610, supplies.
page 1 under CHS.
CHS, yeah.
CHS, yeah.
Okay, got it. And then where? The 610, okay.
610, so it might just be that 2022 was just artificially low as far as the actual expenditures. Maybe if we just see what are this year's expenditures, like year-to-date, that
Year-to-date,
might
yeah.
tell us
Okay.
if that's actually the right number.
Yeah, it seems weird.
And then,
I wonder if you guys, did you spend ahead or something? Did you have money left over in 21 or something,
Well,
maybe?
I mean, yeah, I was doing that in my head, but that's not the pandemic year, so I'm really not sure. The other piece is, there have been some personnel changes in the main office, and, you know, it's easy for somebody who's done a budget for a long time to be just in a routine, and somebody else comes in and says, we've got a boatload of things on the shelf, I don't need to buy that. And so I'm wondering if that might be a factor of it, because we've experienced that in some of the schools.
Okay, yep, if we could just look into that.
and going back to the porta potties, I think Mr. Barkett did happen to find that in the budget.
Yeah, page 16, 442, I think it was.
In the high school budget?
Yeah.
Their athletics, yep.
Well, actually, back to that supplies, I tried at the school board meeting to reduce that line by $2,000, and that was a failed, vote.
Oh, that's 610
Yeah.
supplies?
And on that, so it's a $2,000 line for porta potties. If you want to give us a name of somebody to contact, we'd be
Yeah,
happy to
I'll
do
send it
that.
to you.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, so I can take out the porta potty question, you
Yeah,
found it?
Yep.
Does soccer pay for the one at GMS?
They do in the fall.
Okay,
Spring is there because of softball, baseball, so there's one down there. But in the fall, the soccer league pays for it.
okay.
Other questions for CHS? All right, let's move to food service. Do a quick overview from Dr. Jetty and then jump in with any questions.
All right, so our food service director, Lauren Crowley, noted the following in terms of driving her budget. So for decreases, there were eliminated excess expenditures, including laundry and unused school nutrition association memberships. And basically, we were sending our linens out for cleaning, and we're now doing those in-house. So we're using the laundry machines that we have in-house to take care of that. So that's saved on some of the expense. We also have increased repairs and maintenance lines, particularly at LMS, by $2,900. That's because the kitchen will be all brand new. So there's no expected expense in the year to come because it'll all be under warranty as of the start of the year. For increases, though, we have seen the same thing everybody is at home. She's put an 11% increase for food due to inflation. That's the first line that's in the budget, and just keep in mind, it's not an actual expense but the commodities line is not an actual expense because we have to budget for that, but those are commodities that we receive from the USDA. And there's a $500 increase due to inflation for other supplies, so her paper goods, trays, forks, that sort of thing. And also an addition of equipment lines for a vending machine at Campbell and the middle school. And I'm gonna ask Doug to speak to that, because we were in a conversation today about vending machines, and I'm not sure exactly where we have landed on that.
Yeah, so when you have a part of your budget, which, you know, your goal is to get as much revenue as expenses, you start looking at where can you get more revenue. And vending machines is a key spot because of the fact that it's not just during the school day that kids come into the building. It's, after school for basketball, other sports, throughout the whole spring, winter, and then fall as well. Plus, if clubs are in there after school as well. So we have an option to purchase a vending machine, which we can, hook up the credit card reader to as well. So on the weekends it could be used, as well as have meals that come out of it. So, students can get their meal, it'll be refrigerated vending machine, so it could be more like a yogurt type of parfait type of meal too. So it could charge against their account that way also. So it's a way for us to follow what other school districts are doing, which is bring in just a more diverse vending machine option. The tricky part with that is what kind of links with our system. You have one vendor to go through, so there's not a lot of competition. And then with that, we're trying to get down to the lowest price, because there's some interest rates, that they want to charge if we purchase it over 4 years. So we're just trying to figure out what's the best way to purchase it at this point.
I think the key thing on vending is that food service is looking to increase that revenue stream. And we all know the basketball league is in the middle school all weekend. And if we can provide a service for folks who are there without a labor cost associated, they'll be able to fill the machine as part of the regular workday, and then we can capitalize on revenue. So that we're trying to get smarter about doing that, and at both the high school and the middle school.
So is that 3,500, is that just 1 year of a lease?
It's 1 year, if you add up the lease over 4 years without the interest. At the beginning, when we printed this, we didn't know there was interest on top of that as well.
Okay, and is it our food services staff that are filling that, or is somebody coming in and filling that?
It would be our food service staff.
So there's no service contract or something to go with it?
Yeah.
It's just buy the machine?
Yeah, once we buy the food, we put it in there, then whatever, we get the profit. We get all the profit of excess of the cost.
Is there a line item for the food that would go into that? Where would that come from?
That would just be from the
Commodities?
food. Well, no, the commodities are a little bit different. So the government gives you a certain amount that you can go in and use, and no money exchanges hands. Like, we don't give them money, they don't give us money. We just get to kind of choose from their list what we're looking to get, whether it's cheese or meats or things like that.
Okay.
So the commodities was a little bit interesting, where the fiscal year 22 actual was zero. It really wasn't zero. It was over 30,000. We went back and we looked at that, why it was zero. And what a lot of schools do is they wait for their audit to occur, and the auditors kind of identify the actual amount for commodities. And when our auditors did that, for whatever reason, they highlighted it in red. And when they said anything we highlight in red, don't enter. It's just for an awareness type of thing, where we wish that they had told us to enter it in. I think going forward, we would enter that in to actually show what actually we were able to get free in a way from the government. But there's other food supply lines too, as you go down to each of the schools.
So that's where the items for the vending machine would come out of line 630.
Yep.
Okay.
So from the school board with the food service too, there was 3 changes to the budget. Again, these are mainly entry errors and saving errors. So on page 1, 580 travel, we had meant to take that 1,300 out, and the school board followed through with that. So they took out the 1,300, so travel was at 200 instead of 1,500. And then on page 2, at the top, 580 travel, you can see in the notes it says 100, but over in the requested budget, it was 0. So it just didn't get quadruple saved. So the school board moved that up to 100 for 580 at the top of page 2. And then towards the bottom of page 2, LMS 430 line, repairs and maintenance, we were looking to make that line 1,000 by a significant decrease to LMS kitchen repairs, and the school board authorized that change as well. So that 430 went to 1,000.
So the school board reduced food service in total by $2,200 from what was originally presented. Correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So your bottom line is now $37,703, correct?
That's what I have, 37,703.
Going back to the vending machines, I know there was a discussion last week about potentially trying it in one place because we still haven't received the one for, was it CHS that we're for year 2? So,
We haven't signed on CHS either. We're still negotiating with them.
so I know there was a discussion about, do we try it out, see how it works, pilot it, see how much money we're gonna make off of it before we invest? Has there been any more discussions about that internally at the district level?
Yeah, that's still our goal, to purchase CHS first, and then next year is where the LMS one comes in the budget. And then it takes roughly right now 5 months by the time you sign before you even get it. So even if we signed in August, July of next year, it would still take 5 months in order to get the middle school one. So, but we plan on rolling out the high school one and having it at several months before we make a decision on the middle school one. Because the middle school one will also have to be most likely not as open during the school day as a high school one, just because middle school kids can roam a lot easier, and it's fine if high school kids roam because before you know it, they're in college and careers type of thing, so they have to get used to that, but it's a little bit different for the middle school. But again, the middle school has great revenue on the weekends with the basketball and other sports that are there.
And we're actually talking 2 different vendors, and I want to be clear about that. So there's the food machine that's linked to the student account, vends certified meals. In other words, a reimbursable meal can be purchased from a student's meal account through that machine. There's also a beverage machine that is supplied by the contractor, and that's not, that also is something that we're increasing and having food service take on. So at the middle school, when I was talking about basketball, it's a vending machine for beverage. And then if the vending machine for food at the high school is successful, we'll talk about bringing the same to the middle school.
Got it. So the line item that's in there for LMS vending machine is not the same as what you're talking about putting in at CHS right out of the gate.
No, it is. That's one that you could put meals in there as well. But we were working with Lauren today, talking with Lauren today, and she plans on bringing over a beverage one to the middle school as well. But the one in the budget would be us purchasing, and therefore we get to stock the food, and we don't have any upcharges on the food. And that would be, you could do refrigerated food or non-refrigerated food.
So is the beverage one in the budget, or is that?
No,
The vendor supplies that.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Other questions for food service?
How do we determine our prices?
Our lunch prices?
Because that was a pretty standard opportunity for raising revenue, so how do we determine our prices for food?
So we have to go through a process that's outlined by the federal government. I mean, it's a reimbursement. The state then has a worksheet and a series of, it's a worksheet that you have to go through. So we did increase prices this year, but you have to base it upon the results of this work that's done, calculations that are done. It's not just, we want to charge.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, if
right?
we're
So-
seeing an 11% increase in our food, naturally one would expect that our prices would go up.
And the worksheet would incorporate that. So you would put, like, what were the actual food expenses, what were the amounts that were charged, and so forth. And then it does come out with a price that is able to be charged based on that.
All right, so we should see an increase in the revenue side, so.
We did raise prices.
We
No, I
did
know,
raise
We-
prices.
this,
approved
this
that.
budget will show the expenses. There's also a revenue sheet, so if prices have gone up, then one would expect that the revenue forecast would also have gone up.
At least 10% or more.
Right,
And we'll do the worksheet again at the end of this year.
right,
For next year's expenses, so,
Okay.
and see where that lands.
awesome, good, thank you.
So going back to the commodities, because at the beginning you said Lauren came up with 11% increase. So what I was gonna ask is, does the state dictate? Because like you said, there's no cost, it's just you're basically putting numbers down. So,
So the 11% went with the food increase, so it was, what it was Lauren and I kind of Googling different food increases, cost and food increases. And, they varied, but we kind of decided that 11% seemed to be where most of the searches led us to. So that's where it was. It wasn't any more scientific than that.
and within the commodities line, doesn't really matter, like you said, you're getting full reimbursement anyway.
And Lauren's gotten very creative about what she takes from the commodity side. So she looks for higher value items that she's able to get a deeper discount on.
So the last question I have, as far as on that vending machine for CHS, do you have a location of where you're thinking of placing that right now?
By the gym.
By the gym, are you gonna put it in place of the vending machine that's been empty for quite some time, or?
We were.
There's one of three there that's been empty like forever, I'm not sure.
So
why.
it's funny, Brian, the three of us were standing in front of those vending machines today talking about that. The one that's empty, nobody can find the key to. So on my phone, I have a photograph of the key code, and I'm like, here, send it to the Coke guy, because they ought to be able to come up with a
Probably sell a little
key
more product, yeah.
that matches to that. So yes,
It's gonna go in line with that line of vending machines?
well, yes. I believe the one that is empty is gonna go to the middle school, and then, we'll take care of getting another one there. But we need a key first. So,
I think during like games and practices, those things do fantastic as long as you're stocking with the right thing.
yep, we agree.
Other food service questions? Okay. Let's move on to HR. Don't believe there were any changes. This is a one-pager. I believe there were any changes from the school board last week, and this one is up $3,567 from last year.
And you can see, when our HR director, Holly Falzone, put this forward, it's an increase of $4,107 in what's called Vector software. So, Vector is an employee training module. It's got a boatload of courses that are incorporated and included in there.
Compliance type courses, right?
All compliance, slips, trips, and falls, and everybody's
Bloodborne
gotta do the
pathogen.
video training once a year kind of thing. So, what we had been doing was this very piecemeal approach, and now it's one-stop shopping. Log into Vector, everything we can assign to all our employees, everything that's there, we can see exactly who's done it, generate reports. So it just streamlines the whole process. And frankly, in a day and age of litigation, making sure that we've assigned everything and can track it is really important. So I think the annual expense is gonna be well worth it to make sure that our employees are getting it. And there's a boatload of additional courses. So, food service workers can take additional training, or if we have a snow day and people can do training that way, it's just a better way of going about it. And also to help pay for it, she's cut her travel line by $450. So, we've all talked about the need to not travel, to not, go away to conferences, and to try to find stuff that's a little bit more local. So Holly made that cut.
Questions for HR?
Is she planning to include subs in that training?
So is it a per person expense? You remember how it's budgeted?
I don't remember.
I think permanent subs would be a part of that. Is that or like long-term subs?
I mean, I think the,
Subs in the
Any-
Vector software, is that what you're saying?
yeah, I would think anyone that's in the building should have at least a few of that. So if this is based on per person, I would hope that subs are included too.
Yeah, let me double check on that, Kate, because I'm
Okay.
not positive. I know long-term subs, we try to incorporate daily subs. I mean, there's some people who are in every single day and might as well be a long-term sub, right? And then there's some people who come in once a week or
Yep.
even less frequently, so.
I'm concerned like a fire drill and that person that comes in once a week, once a month even, fire drill happens and, they don't know the classroom, they don't know like.
Right.
Or something from a
Or-
reporting standpoint.
Right, or, yeah, even small things that, like there's a small amount of training, but I just feel like there could be some real value there, getting that training
I agree.
elevated.
Yep, we'll double check.
But you are talking about Vector, but the line above it has that per employee cost. I'm not sure if the Vector actually does have that.
Yeah, the line
See what I
above it
mean?
is actually, that's our Benefit Strategies, which is our company that runs our FSA accounts.
Is that what
So-
you were looking at?
No, I'm talking about the
That's-
vector.
You are, you just wanna
Safety.
make sure subs are part of that, okay.
Other questions for HR? Just a quick question. Was there, you mentioned, this is coming in to replace kind of how it was piecemeal together before. Was there a cost associated with how it was done in the past and piecemealed together? Was
So
that,
there were actually two costs. One of those, so first of all, we had run it through Google Classroom, so there wasn't really the same cost, but it was a labor cost in terms of matching up, okay, who did this, who did this, who did this, and who's gonna generate that list, and then who's gonna hunt people down to get it done kind of thing.
Yep.
Versus now, we can just generate a report, so, and people get a certificate showing that they've completed, so they have that. So it wasn't an expense per se, but it was an expense,
Time.
because it
Yeah,
was somebody
sure.
doing something that now is streamlined. The other thing is that in the special ed budget, there was a program called Master Teacher, and we use Master Teacher to provide training opportunities for paraprofessionals and other support staff members. It wasn't used as much by the teachers, but it was available. And so we've cut that. So that was eliminated from the budget. Honestly, we had staff who, certainly during the pandemic, they had done all the Master Teacher training. They had done it all. And so doing it all again didn't make as much sense. So having something fresh and new also, I think, has value and merit.
thank you. Other questions for HR? All right, let's move to food service salaries. I did want to make a quick comment, because this came up with a question that Mr. Leary had asked me today. If any of you had been using the analysis that Mr. Cutter had done and provided, there's a section that analyzed salaries across the district. It did not include, at least what I was able to find, it did not include this specific component to it. So a lot of the analysis that was done around the salaries that's in that spreadsheet that he provided are all the salaries found on the next section, not the food service piece. So I just want to make sure, as an FYI. Did you have an update for a specific section just for food service
I
salaries?
do not. So
Okay.
food service is,
Okay.
because that's a self-funded line, so I actually did not have a slide
Okay.
for that.
Questions for food service salaries? This one had an increase of 54,000, which looks to be mostly tied to benefits, insurance, retirement.
Yeah, what really was the change that was one of the leads did not take insurance before, and then now the new lead does, so
Is
sometimes
that included in the personnel, or where is that found
It's-
in the paper?
first 3 pages of the personnel budget.
Alright.
So
My
Carrie,
first pages are
you and I have something in common. I don't have it either.
yeah, my first page is regular education.
It was a separate handout on the first night, I believe,
Alright,
and I didn't grab it.
Scott's section.
Well, the
Right,
handout
so-
would replace, there was 3 pages there
I
before.
have it carried.
I didn't get them. Nobody gave them to me.
which one is it?
Can, you don't have this. It'd help if I take
Are
a
the leads
picture.
full-time employees?
No, I have it.
There,
There.
There, that's why I have it.
Okay. Questions for food service salaries?
Maybe just give people a minute to look,
Yeah,
because they
yep.
haven't seen it before.
I have a question. It kind of ties to the insurance increase, but it's also going to connect to the next one. And I'd already put it in the Google Doc of, do we have updated insurance numbers for the FY24 budget? Because I know it connects here and it connects to the next one as well.
so I believe we do, but myself, Mike, and Holly haven't had a chance to sit down yet, but I think Holly has the updated numbers, I'm almost positive she does. But we were looking to find time to sit down, we just haven't been able to do that yet.
Okay.
Holly sent us a memo late this afternoon, or this afternoon when I saw it. So our intent is to take that forward to the board next Wednesday, so that we can update the board on this is exactly where it's come in. And then they'll take the action they're gonna take, and we'll bring it back to you next Thursday night, so you'll have it. But it was hot off the press today.
There yesterday, yeah.
So health insurance almost doubled. Does that mean somebody else is taking it, a change in plan, like,
Yeah, if you go to page 2, the top of page 2, you'll notice that there was no health insurance the year before, and then there is now health insurance, with somebody now taking the plan.
This is one of the sticky things about personnel budgets that, I mean, I have said, it frustrates me that you can figure out what somebody's doing for insurance based on single employees. And we haven't yet figured out a way to sort of mask that, but in this case, it's a small department. And so one person taking a plan shows up as an increase, and you can,
why would you mask it?
by person. So
Why? I guess the question is why?
because I don't think it's anybody's business that a person is taking a family plan or taking a two-person plan or taking a single plan or taking no plan. I think that's a guaranteed benefit, but I'm not sure that somebody should be able to say that's tied to person X. I think that's where it gets problematic. Salary is one thing, but I think healthcare is something that should be pooled in a way that doesn't identify somebody's own individual choices within the options.
What if they were listed by their employee ID number? instead
Yeah,
of
we
name?
tried to do, we can't get that report. I mean, honestly, we spent hours trying to, how can we report this in a different way? And you can't get that, it doesn't work, our system doesn't work that way.
We might have more options next summer to kind of, if we start approaching it in the summer, then after kind of the budget kind of rolls over as well.
I think we've got to call e-finance and
Yep.
poke at it. too.
But does the budget,
I just think that you're.
do we really need that breakout as far as by individual? I mean, it's actual dollars.
I just think
We're
you
not
start
going
messing with
insurance.
a report that's been reported, the way it's been reported for many, many years, people start asking why. So, I mean, I appreciate the concern, but I don't think people are gonna knock on people's doors and be like, hey, you cost us a family plan! I don't think that happens.
No, but I don't think it's really necessary for us to know, is what I'm saying.
I don't know what the reporting requirements are. They put people's names in the town reports for salaries. So, like, I don't,
That's why I
They
said-
do, but they don't put it in for insurance.
again,
Right.
I
To his point, you could see it's one of 4 people. Right.
Just give us a total dollar. It's like,
Yeah, so I'm trying to find a way, can we pool it? But on the flip side, it is reported out by building, and then the state does calculations based on, expenditure amounts, not so much with food service, but expenditure amount by level to determine per pupil expenditures at level. So it's, how do you get all this stuff to mesh and sort of protect people individually at the same time? If you look at, I'll just give you an example, but if you look at Griffin teachers, there are 20 people in the pool, and you can't tell what any one of those 20 do. But if you look at Griffin art, there's one person in the pool, and you can know everything about that person, and it's just, is that really the right way to proceed? That's the question we're having internally. Versus there are, out of 30 teachers at Griffin, there are 15 family plans, 2 single plans, that's a very different level of reporting than,
There's not a requirement, because I've worked in other states where school districts are required to show salary benefits year by year. That's not a New Hampshire requirement that's posted.
I'm not aware of that. And quite honestly, the budget that the town of Litchfield gets is very detailed. There are more details in this budget than a typical school district. The personnel budget, for example, in Bedford is a bottom line number. It doesn't get into any of the numbers. And if somebody says, I'd like to know the salary of so-and-so, that's generated, but it's not printed in and put on the website in the same way that it is here. And I hadn't seen it in my prior district either, so.
Yes. So looking at other budgets, the Litchfield budget is very transparent, and I think overall that's a good thing, and that's what we plan on, keep on bringing to you and to everybody. But that was the one thing that we have spent some time talking about is it too transparent with healthcare, or is there a different way just to kind of still obviously report the healthcare cost, but take a little bit away from who is getting exactly what?
So I think that, again, I see no problem with, but, because one of the things that would pop up to me is, these look like hourly, are these full-time positions or part-time positions? Because then I would say, if they're part-time positions and then there's insurance involved, why? So for me, it triggers the whole,
Only,
that conversation.
only
leads- the
full-time
leads
people
are
get,
full-time.
only full-time people would get insurance.
Okay.
And, and,
Then allows you to identify the
Exactly
person.
who it is, yeah.
Yeah.
right. And, you know, all of that is part of the collective bargaining. You can look at, I mean, we can answer the question, who's entitled to what are the ratios, et cetera. But again, I think it should be more general than individual based.
So I guess from one perspective, is this a concern that's been brought to you guys, or is this a concern you're? bringing up?
I brought it up.
So have any employees expressed concern about the way it's currently reported? Or are we
We-
creating a problem that doesn't exist? Like, if we're solving a problem that
No,
doesn't exist, then,
it's, other towns are concerned about it as well. So
but have
I-
any of our employees said, I'm sorry, but I'm uncomfortable with the way it's currently reported? Because if there's not, then I wouldn't mess with it, because now taxpayers are gonna be like, well, why are you messing with it? If there's a concern that's been brought forward by an employee, that's a different situation. But if we're solving a problem we don't have, then don't solve it.
I think it's valid that our business administrator brought it up as a concern.
I think you're gonna be, given where we are, if we start messing with how things are reported, we're gonna cause bigger problems. That's my.
I'm not overly worried about the why of this. I think the why of this is to protect people. I don't think they always bring things forward because they always don't look at the whole budget and realize that their benefits are very blatantly right out there type of thing. As we looked at the whole budget, as I said, it's very transparent. The only thing we have talked about taking away, as far as a little less transparency, is the healthcare. We haven't talked about not being transparent in anything else. So I think that's important for people who are listening to hear. I haven't come here and said, let's take away more transparency. This is the one thing that I said, I think we're going a little bit too far on this.
I'm actually surprised it's allowed, to be honest.
Well,
Just given how personal healthcare decisions are and stuff like that.
I question it under a HIPAA thing, but not knowing HIPAA, but also knowing HIPAA's about that thick. So I'm sure somewhere in there, somebody could say, this is nobody's business. It really is a contract between that person and the employer, which I understand the taxpayers are the ultimate employer, but,
Yeah.
but lumping it together is not personally identifying. And so that's the edge that we're trying to walk. And sometimes we're trying to solve problems that don't exist yet. So if you smell it and you see it coming, head it off. Don't wait till it hits you. And so I think that's what we're just being sensitive to. And right now you got it exactly where you've always had it. But if it's not that way next year, we planted the seed as to a why and where we may be headed if we can get this figured out.
All right. Anything else on food service salaries? All right, let's move to general fund salaries.
So I think it's the largest budget that's in there because, reminders to the public that 78% of our expense is in personnel. We're in the people business. We educate little people and we have big people doing that work to make that happen every day. So driving this, and it's gonna take me a little bit to walk through this section of it, but we have 2 collective bargaining agreements, so the voters were very supportive of us last year. We had LEA, which is our professional association, and also LSSA for our support staff. And we were able to have second-year contracts for both of them in the budget that you're looking at. So one group had an estimated increase of 3% and the other an estimated increase of 3.76%. It's actually not by group. It depends upon which scale in each of those contracts and where people are on those scales. So those were the wages that were negotiated and supported by the voters. For our non-union support staff and non-union staff, there is a pool in here for increases of 3%. And what we did is we indexed that to what was supported for the union groups. For severance, there are now 4 staff members included for their severance package. They have indicated that they may choose to separate at the end of the year. And so on July 1st, they would be entitled to the severance package in the collective bargaining. And so that amount has been included in here. Substitute teachers, we increased that by $52,000 because we have seen an increase in our need to have subs as teachers, subs as paras, subs as monitors, subs as custodians. And so again, with the labor shortages that we've experienced, we needed more money in the sub line. For long-term subs, we went we had an increase of $50,000 in that line. So we have just seen more people taking extended leaves, and so that has resulted in a need to increase that amount. And then contractually, there are always changes that take place. So at the high school and the middle school, there is a 6-period teacher coverage language that we have to honor, and we have to make sure we have the money for that. There are pay grade changes. So if somebody finishes their master's degree, they sort of advance on the salary schedule mid-year, and so we have to have a pool to cover that increase. Also longevity and vacation buybacks. We want to make sure that all the money that's contractually covered is included in the budget. Having said that, everybody should realize that we have actually prepared this based on our current staff and current benefit elections. So if a member were to change the benefits that they get, or if somebody left and somebody new came in, the budget has to have that flexibility to adjust for that person also as that change takes place. So health insurance, we talked about. We were planning a 10% increase, and we will be presenting to the board exactly what the numbers turned out to be and the effect that they would have on the budget. But the 10% increase was included in the budget that you have in front of you. Dental also was planning on a 1.5% increase, and those numbers are included here, but they'll be finalized next Wednesday with the board. Teacher retirement system actually decreased the rates that they're charging, and so you can see that the teacher amount went from 21% down to 19.64%, and then the employee amount went from 14.06% down to 13.53%. So those were also incorporated into this. And finally, FICA, Medicare, long-term disability, those have all increased because they're a percentage of the salary. So when salaries go up, they have to be adjusted accordingly. So that's all been incorporated into what you have. And then for attrition, we did spend time talking about and reviewing the attrition worksheet, and that has resulted in a salary and benefit savings of $176,324, and that's been budgeted for.
So that was one of the school board voted on, approved changes, and they approved 150,000 coming off of the salaries.
So that 176 includes that 150 that the school board took action on.
So the attrition thing's a little bit different, because the attrition thing is, we're talking about fiscal year '24 budget, but actually it's looking back at this past year type of thing. So they looked at the totals at the bottom, and they felt comfortable saying, okay, we can work with 150,000 off of salaries due to kind of historic averages of attrition. So those are actual numbers, and they looked at the 150 being comfortable with that.
Can you go back to the presentation real quick? Were you finished? Was that your last slide?
There's a couple more
Okay,
beyond
go
that,
ahead.
but I wanted to pause on the attrition part. And excuse me, so the number that was in the slide was the 176 that's here. Those are the actual realized attrition costs from the current school year based on who retired at the end of last year and who we were able to hire in. And then, as Doug said, the board took action around the 150 amount. So they've already taken that cut.
Do we have that spreadsheet that you're showing right now? The attrition spreadsheet?
It's a link, I just linked off of the presentation, so
I don't think we have the presentation itself. We never got that.
let me get you the presentation, because that has, right there in pink is the link to that spreadsheet, so I'll
Okay.
share that with you.
Thank you.
Actually, I'll send it your way, and then you probably can share it more easily. A couple of other things that were included in the budget that's in front of you. So we have taken some reductions in personnel. Those are based upon really enrollments that we've seen. So as enrollment has declined in the schools and we've looked at programs, we are proposing some reductions. I'll hit those, and then Doug can clarify if any got added back in or changed. But the first is a music teacher. So there are currently 4 music teachers in the district, and our proposal is to go down to 3, 1 per school. And so that position is not included in the budget that you have in front of you. The special education teachers, so we have one open position at the middle school now that we were not able to fill. And our intent is to take that as a cut for next year. And also a position at the high school. Our intent is to reduce by one the number of teachers that are there. ELL, so when we presented this budget to the board, we were proposing to reduce the amount of time that the ELL teacher was working from full-time to part-time. However, we're reversing course on that. So we're gonna ask the board next Wednesday to restore that back to 100%. So whether the board will take that action or not, I'm not sure. But there's been it's been quite a journey to figure out the best pathway for ELL. And our intent is to make the case with the board that we should be restoring that back to full-time.
Sorry,
What changed?
what's ELL?
I'm sorry, ELL is English Language Learners, so
Oh,
these are our
okay.
students who are not native speakers.
Yep.
What's changed is a deeper understanding of exactly how many students, where they are, what it takes to administer services, what are the guaranteed services based upon the testing scores that they receive and so forth. So it was really back and forth dialogue with the ELL teacher that helped us to recognize that that was a cut that was too deep. And the other thing is that in larger districts, there's an economy of scale, so you can group together students you might have multiple ELL students in one grade level. That seems not to be our experience. We have students here or there, and so it's really a challenge to take somebody who is not a native speaker, and then couple older and younger students together. The curriculum's not the same, so anyway, we'll be presenting all of that to the board.
So did you not have that conversation with the ELL person before presenting the reduction? I mean, I personally, I find it a little troubling that this, we make a reduction, we're all in favor of it. Oh, wait, now we talk to them and now we don't support it anymore.
No, we certainly had that conversation. However, it was, how do I phrase it? There's been just a lot of clarity that's arrived on the conversation. So it's now much more clear what our expectations are, what the state is expecting, reviewing state guidelines and matching those back to practices. So all of that has now been done. The other is, and it doesn't mean, by the way, I'm telling you what our intent is to bring to the board, but we don't, it's up to the board to
No, I
make that
appreciate
final
that. Like
decision.
it just, to me, it's startling to me that we would make a reduction without having the full backing of the person we're planning to reduce. That's all. Or the department from whom we are reducing. It just, to me, it's.
You never get the full backing of the person.
Well, I
you're planning to
appreciate that.
To be clear.
Clearly, they made a good enough case to make you change course, and reality is, by the time you get here, we should have had those conversations. So it's just.
Can
That's
assure
where the
you-
conversation started. They all started with the staff at the school levels.
Yeah. The other is that the principals have proposed eliminating the 2 receptionists at the middle school and at the high school. And that is based upon, remember, this has been a little bit of a process and an exercise. So we had streamlined and standardized our staffing levels in the offices at all 3 schools. And then in examining that and taking a look at the way the office flow and workflow goes, both the middle school and the high school feel that they can function very successfully with 2 personnel in the office. That's pretty consistent, by the way, with what other schools in our region do, and with student populations. And we're not taking that reduction. I was asked this question the night that we presented this to the board, but we're not taking it Griffin because Griffin is a little bit larger. There are 5 grades instead of 4, plus preschool, so sort of 5.5 grades if you factor in preschool. And the other piece is that our parents at the elementary school have different needs. The students are not as able to take their own action. They're not necessarily texting with their parents and so forth yet. And so our feeling is that we need that personnel in the office. And also, with the current setup, although we have a secure entrance for people to come into, it's across the hallway, a busy hallway with kids going to the bathroom out in that area. So it really is not a good setup. And so our feeling is to keep the receptionist at the elementary school makes sense at this time. All of that results in estimated savings of $360,000, depending on the board action relative to ELL, which I think is about a $30,000 request that we'll be bringing to them. And then position changes, we are adding in an LMS and CHS special ed team lead. So those positions will help to make sure that the special ed teams at the two schools are able to stay on track. There'll be somebody to help to organize those teams and the workflow that needs to be done. So that's consistent with other curriculum facilitator type of positions in both buildings. Also, because of the reduction in receptionists, we are adding 2.5 hours weekly to the administrative assistant at LMS and CHS. So right now, we'll end up with 2 full-time 40-hour week employees. So adding that 2.5 to the one person, so they go from 37.5 to 40. And that has an estimated increase of $9,500. So you get your estimated changes to the budget savings, which is $350,500.
And that doesn't change their benefit status. They're already eligible for benefits.
Correct.
Do you want questions at the end or per slide?
No, I can take it per slide. It may be easier.
I was just wondering the 2.5 hours, they're already eligible for benefits, right? Okay, and the LMS and CHS special education team leaders, is that like a stipend or like a promotion of
It would be a
current teacher?
stipend.
Okay,
So
Is
there's
that
like an
cost?
English department facilitator who has a stipend, so we've modeled it on that.
That doesn't have a cost. It's rolled into that $9,500.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
oh, I see, okay. Thank you.
And then, yes, the last slide. So the other piece is that we're really examining our special ed services across the budget. So originally, I'm trying to think if it was 2 or 3 years ago, there were 3 school psychologists. There was 1 per building. And we're unable to hire school psychologists. They're just very difficult to find. So we're down to 1 school psychologist at the middle school. But we then had to contract services of school psychiatrists because there are certain tests and certain tasks that only a school psychiatrist can do, psychologist can do. So, our plan is to take the current school psychologist position and to promote it to a district-wide position and to expand it from a school year position to a year-round position. There are students who are referred for testing in June at the end of the year, and there's a 45-day window that you have to complete the testing in. So having that position span over the summer would prevent us having to contract out with somebody to provide those services. So the other piece is that by taking that person out of the middle school, we would need to replace the person with a licensed mental health clinician. So the high school has a licensed mental health clinician. The elementary school has a social worker. And so we're trying to get parity because what we're realizing is that if student's having a bad day and needs somebody to talk to about that, at the middle school, that somebody often is a school psychologist who now is not doing their required work like testing because they're working with a student who's having a difficult day. So what we're trying to do is to get the right people in the right seat on the bus so that we can provide the services that students need and that we're not contracting out to pay for services that can be done in-house. So this is really an effort to streamline all of that and make it more efficient. And so there is an increase that goes with that. However, I believe when you offset that,
I show that was actually one of my comments I had. So I actually show our current increase for this line item as $319,254. Doug, is that accurate? And what I based that on was the attrition action that was taken on November 3rd by the school board. So I backed that out of the 469,254 increase. And if I did that correctly, and I'm applying that in the right spot, then that budget is now up $319,254.
Yeah, so the 102 increases is for that kind of reworking of there, and then overall, the budget is up for other reasons.
Right. That's what I was saying. I think he was getting ready to say that it's up 500K, right?
Oh, okay. I see what
I
you're
skipped
saying.
ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
No, I really want to talk about, and I think we have to map out exactly where the increases and decreases are relative to this repositioning. Because what I'm not certain, so for example, we paid $120,000 in contracted services to a person. And if we can avoid that expense, I'm not sure that we've done the crediting against this correctly. So I want us to kind of examine this a little bit more in depth and figure out exactly what the cost is for this realignment. So we couldn't hire a school psychologist for $50,000, and we end up contracting out the work for $120,000. That's part of the problem, right? And then we have the person who's being paid $50 being asked to do things that, I mean, they're capable of doing, they might enjoy doing, but it's not the work that they're required to do. And so we're just trying to be smarter about making sure the right person's in the right seat. So let us come back to that, JD.
So would an employee in-house, would not eliminate the need for contracted services, would it? I assume there would still be times when they still need it.
Yeah, so for example, if that person gets hit with multiple referrals for testing and they simply can't keep up with the flow, you might have to contract out one of those tests. But the current model is that at Campbell, they're all being contracted out, and at the elementary school, they're all being contracted out because there's no school psychologist there. And then the school psychologist is serving as middle school psychologist and social worker / clinician / they're there to take, they're being asked to do it all. And we think that there's a way we can be more efficient with the use of those dollars.
It looks like that was in 23, that was $94,920. What's being asked for this year is $49,460. That's under contracted psychological services.
Which page is that?
Page 7. I went to special services. Sorry. I know we're not on special services budget. It's in the special services budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, this is why I think we haven't captured it, because we're,
And my point is, it shows a $45,000 reduction in that line item, but it still shows $50,000 sitting there for FY24.
Oh, special.
I'm on page 7 of special services. Sorry. Yeah.
Nope.
I know it's not in
Didn't catch that.
personnel, but I was connecting the dots there.
so actually, look at, excuse me, the 3-year averaging of that line. So in FY 2020, we spent $20,898. That's when we had 3 school psychs. And we still had to contract out a little bit of the work. And then the next year, it was at 123,000. So it went up by 100,000 because we didn't have a school psych, and contracting out is way more expensive than having the employee on staff. The next year, it was $100,000. And again, that's going to depend on the workflow that you're contracting out. And it's been approved this year at $95,000 really. So what we're doing is taking that reduction. I'm not sure we've applied that reduction to this increase, and that's what I want to just verify.
I think that'd be a great exercise and a nice chart. I like
Yep.
charts.
And I think we'll get you exactly that kind of a chart so that we can be sure to explain
I
it
put
to
it
people.
on the questions, map out increase, decreases relative to realignment.
Yeah. Thank you.
But to your point, it's all intended to be a cost savings for us, and it's also recognizing that if the person's asked to do 4 reports in a row within a 45-day window, we might have to contract one of those out because a person just can't get that level of work done. That happens. Unfortunately, you have legal requirements and timelines that you have to meet, and not everybody gets referred according to those timelines, so there has to be something left in there.
We did get one answer on one of the questions. Does everybody see that? World languages. What supplies will comprise the $2,400? Because of state minimum standards indicating we must offer consumer science standards like cooking and sewing, it will be encompassed in the 2 Spanish courses through cultural cooking and crafts. I think we talked about the cooking, but crafts in addition.
So Principal Grantham is watching from home.
I really like that idea of covering that with the Spanish class.
Anything else on your end for the presentation here?
So I think if we go back a couple slides,
One more?
I think so, yeah. So the severance right there, so in your packets, it's showing 3 staff members of severance. And we have to update that for the 4th. That's something that we talked about with the board. We just didn't make the motions to update that. So that'd be updated to 3 different lines that would occur. All of those lines would be on page 1 of the budget. But those have not gone through motions from the school board yet. One of the lines is actually gonna be a reduction because the amount of FICA in there for Social Security was misstated, and it was actually supposed to be lower. So the lines that we'd be looking to update with the school board are the district-wide 110 line, the salaries, 220 Social Security, and again, the 220 will go down, and the 232 teacher retirement, both the teacher retirement and the salaries would go up with that 1 additional severance payment.
I had a question on that one. So since these are teachers who say, I think I'm going to retire, but aren't necessarily guaranteed, I'd be curious, were any of them people who notified us last year as well? And the reason I would ask is because then we set aside the money last year. If it didn't get spent for that purpose, obviously it goes to the bottom line, but now we have to fund it again. So curious as to whether or not any of these are repeat notifications.
So there are repeat notifications, to your point. We've had a conversation and are gonna talk with the board about this, so I'm getting the cart before the horse on this one, but I think doesn't make a lot of sense to budget each year for something that doesn't occur.
I don't think it's fair to the
Your point.
taxpayers to ask them
Agreed.
to fund a severance package more
Completely
than
agree.
once.
So what we're thinking about is whether we should create a teacher retirement trust fund conceptually, so that we can just park the money once,
Pretty sure I've suggested such a thing, so
and it's
I
there.
will.
I'll give you credit for the idea.
So I will sign on to such a thing.
But
I'm just saying, I will support you in that endeavor.
We think we want to mitigate that a little bit, you know. The other thing is, if we were able to carry a contingency, that would be another way to do it.
I like the other way better.
I thought you'd frown at me. So I'll just point out there are a couple of pathways to this, Gary, but we will certainly talk with the board, and I think it's time to take some action on it, because really just budgeting and then rebudgeting doesn't make a ton of sense, so.
Not just doesn't make sense, it's not fair. So I appreciate that you're looking into it.
If you could go forward, I think it's one slide, this one right here. So I may have imagined this, but I was thinking when Holly presented this last week that health insurance was like 20%.
So the
No
question that
worries.
came up with Andrew,
Huh?
when Andrew's analysis showed that the actual amount went up 20%.
Yep.
But again, this is the anomaly with the way the software works. So in the first year of a collective bargaining, the salaries and benefits are a lump sum at the end of the budget. And they're not applied to individuals yet, because at the time the budget's being developed, you're projecting what it's going to be, but you don't know if the voters are gonna support it. So we don't go through and apply it to all the individual lines within the budget until it's been approved by the voters, at which point it gets applied after the fact. So then in the following year, you see the retro pay and the retro health insurance amount distributed out. And then you see the second year's pay and the second year's health insurance. So that results in it appearing as if stuff went up by 20% or people got a 10% raise. And it's really got to do with just the way it operates within the budget.
So
If
has
I've
that been
explained
resolved on the?
it happens every single time in the second year of a collective bargaining.
Well, it also happens each year with health increases too. So if you went to page 44 of the personnel budget, so towards the end, you'll notice that towards the top 211 health insurance, that's where the placeholder is for that 10% increase. And again, we don't know if the increase is in, I don't know what exactly is, but somewhere around 10%. So those aren't with each of the lines above. It's only there. So next year, you'll have the lines before that were budgeted without that 10%, because that 10% is its own part of the budget at the bottom. So it does make looking at from one fiscal year budget to a next a little bit harder.
So like the 100 salaries line, you can see in FY '23, it was approved for 351,187, which is, I believe that was the warrant article amount for the total collective bargaining. And then you'll notice this year, it's requested at 0, because the second year are all personally applied above. And the 351 has been sprinkled all throughout the budget to who was getting that. So it's really not a budget decrease of 351, it's the 351 is all throughout. And the second year is all spread throughout. And, you know, we get asked the question, why did so-and-so get a 10% raise? It's the way it gets reported. And I think it's the same thing with, I'm not sure where the healthcare component is.
Down there.
Oh,
So-
yep.
But I think back to, because I know Mr. Cutter brought this up, and there were some conversations about this. Like when you look at the analysis that he did, it showed health insurance across the district was up $500,000 and change, and yet, you know, this is showing 10%, $243K. Is that additional $300K accounted, like retracted out somewhere? Does that make sense?
So I believe it to be the same as the salary piece, but what I have to do is figure out where it was in last year's budget. So we ought to be able, like, we can clearly see the 351 is a decrease here, right, when it comes to salary. So there ought to be a comparable amount for the insurance.
So with Andrew's comments, we spent several hours last week working with Holly and looking at the health insurance, and we just haven't had a chance to cycle back to that. Because with health insurance, a lot of times you slide over that number that was used before, and then you use that bottom number to add 10% as a placeholder. I don't know what they added last year, maybe it was 10% again or 9% type of thing too. But the health insurance rates have been, you have your expected rate and then your effective rate, because there's been health premiums, health credits that's been coming to us. So, and the employees get a portion of that as well, because they pay into their health insurance. So what we want to do is get something together that kind of shows what was used for each budgeting year. Because if one year, if you use the effective rates and one year you use the expected rates, it's going to be a little bit different. So we were working on getting that together as well, so it'd be a little bit more clear as far as how the budget was created.
Okay.
So that is a being completed work document, but not quite there yet.
Do you think we would have that by next Thursday?
I would hope you would have it by next Thursday. That
We
would
need-
be our goal.
We need to bring it to the board on Wednesday, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Other questions any questions for personnel?
Do we know how Andrew got the salary history? I was looking at his document, he has every staff member and then FY 20, 21, 22, 23, which obviously isn't in here. So did they go back to other budgets to get all those?
So
See if you know.
so it was requested at one point last year, and I think at that point, he did go back to
Oh, he
different
just copied the other
budgets.
two, okay.
And then he just added on this one column from this year
Okay.
as well. So he had the beginning part done last year.
Okay.
Yes.
Because looking at his numbers, and maybe it's just the way the contract's timed out, if you look at a lot of the staff members, their FY 20 and 21 numbers are exactly the same, and then 2022 and 2023 are exactly the same, and then you see a big bump in 24. Is that because of the way the contracts fell?
It's the point
It's the
that I'm
same issue
making
you're
about
talking
that
about.
salary.
Okay.
Because he's extracting it out of the budget, I believe, and then the salary increase is not applied to an individual. It's a big lump at the end.
Okay.
And then the next year, it's been applied, and the second year of the approved CBA has been added. So again, the appearance is
Yeah.
a large increase, but you really have to look at it as a 2-year increase, because that's what you're really looking at.
Yeah.
And it ought to tie back to the, if we go back to this sheet, and we know our increases are 3 to 3.76%, it ought to tie back to those. You shouldn't see somebody outside of that range over a 2-year number.
Unless they jump different parts on the salary
They could've-
schedule,
they
if
could've,
they
yeah.
went from bachelor's to master's, things like that.
Now we don't know, right?
Yeah.
The other piece too is, if you look at his analysis, I mean, he had some people with like 200% increases. So every one of those is a story behind that individual. So, somebody last year was a paraprofessional and then they became a teacher this year. So all the analysis does is say, how much did they get last year? How much did they get this year? Well, they're not even the same job.
Yeah.
We had people who, we actually have 2 employees with the same name. And the analysis makes it look like that person's salary doubled, because it's now 2 people with the same name, but the analysis didn't catch that. You have to be able to explain, like, that's now 2 people. So,
59.
And people who get married or divorced, right?
Yeah.
Those don't carry over, or
so
they drop off.
everything on that analysis can be explained if you want the
Look at that way,
explanation.
yeah.
Nobody's getting 200% raises, so.
And I appreciate the explanation behind it. I think the analysis provides a nice top-level view in certain places, and then it's our job to ask the questions about why behind some of those. Other questions for personnel?
Well, I just have a quick question. I mean, I would think that the 4 individuals that are retiring have longevity, so they've been around for a while. Probably going to either, right now, cover single coverage for insurance or 2. Then if you turn around and hire younger people, say with a family, just what's the difference? I'm only asking because, I mean, insurance is just spiking like crazy. So how much of a difference is there between like a single and a family plan?
In terms of what it costs,
Yeah.
so we have the rates here.
See how close. So fiscal year '23, school care yellow with the choice fund. It's like a single plan.
Do the annualized district amount, that line.
Yeah, so the district pays about 9,500 for that.
For a
And
single.
then for a single, 19,000, a little bit less than 19,000 for a 2-person, and 25,000, say 600 for a family.
So through attrition, you cut $150,000, but it's possible that you could turn around and spend an extra $100,000 on insurance.
Yeah, I think if we go to that attrition slide, you'll see some years we're saving money on insurance, and some years we're not. Like this past year, we actually did not save money on health insurance. So the people went out, had cheaper plans than people coming in. So yeah, that's a tough one to guess what's gonna happen with that.
There's a sense that, somebody who's been in the system a long time retiring results in savings, and that's just not the case any longer. So first of all, the market is so tight that you can't necessarily hire a first-year teacher. They're just not available in many of the segments. And so you have somebody who retires at the top of the scale. We're hiring at the top of the scale because that's what it takes to get a teacher in front of the children. The other piece is that, that person may be at a different phase of life in terms of the insurance they're taking, but you bring in somebody who's in a different phase of life, and you could have that increased insurance cost. So notice that in the 1920 school year, we saved $132,000 in healthcare costs for through attrition, and last year it was only $21,500. It cost us $21,500 more. So that's a significant swing, just in terms of who it is that you're bringing in. And then you know, everybody's in a different phase of life also. So if you increase the number of maternity or paternity leaves that people have, you're also requiring more long-term subs to cover that. So, you know, but then again, people have surgeries and are out for extended periods. So when you factor all of that in, it's really difficult to predict exactly what you'll have for savings that are in here.
Other questions for personnel?
Is next year a contract year? No,
So
it's
the-
year after.
We signed, so our goal was to stagger off, because we also thought that it was not a fair ask of the public to have two collective bargaining agreements forward. So we staggered them so that one will expire and then the other will expire the next year. So I believe the teachers took a 2-year deal, and they'll be negotiating again next year with a warrant article in '24. And support staff will wait 1 more year.
Okay. Just because I'm concerned, I saw that, you know, the substitute rates are increasing. And I know how, at least when I'm called to be a sub, like 90% of the time it's for para positions, at least in the elementary school. And I'm really concerned, and I know that there's a shortage, but I'm really starting to get concerned that the school district is going to have issues. We already have issues hiring. Is there any way those para rates can be increased to attract more people? Because I'm a little bit concerned that it's gonna turn into a legal issue, that services are not being met or something like that. I haven't heard that one way or the other, but just from what I've seen, I know it's hard to find people, but I also know that we don't have the most competitive rates.
I
So-
believe that was brought up during the last school board meeting when we were considering,
Has anything, did the board, like, I'm not sure what the board ended
there's
up.
no action yet, but I
Yeah.
believe, you know, that was kind of a to-do for the next, you know, one of
So-
the upcoming meetings. I don't know if it's
And,
next.
and the board did take action to increase the sub rate for paras, for example, because
Yeah.
our teacher sub rate was $15.50 an hour and the sub para rate was lower. And so, people were not taking the sub paras positions. And so the board did take action to rectify that at the last meeting. So, but we're paying attention to that. I mean, right now, I'll just use a number. It seems like anything less than $15 an hour is not attractive because somebody can go find that somewhere else, right? So we have to, and I'm worried about, there's still 2 more years left on this, so we've got to pay attention, but it's gonna cost money. It's gotta come from somewhere.
Well, that's what I'm just wondering, is there something in here that needs to go up, or can it not because of the contract?
Well, if the parties agree to reopen a contract, they can do that. I mean, there's a 3-year deal, but if the parties agree to reopen and revisit and discuss that, it's something that can be done, and then it would have to be brought forward.
Okay, so I guess we'll see what the school board does on, is it Wednesday?
I'm not sure Wednesday that
I don't know
action
if it's
will
gonna
be
be
there,
on that agenda,
but
but.
So would we see any changes to this budget as far as para, like, potential increases?
we were not planning to bring anything forward, but I guess the board could always take that action, but boy, it would take, I mean, again, you're reopening a contract, so
Right.
it takes both parties to be willing to do that. And the problem is when you open it, now you'd have to take action to open it for, salaries only, because you don't want to rehash everything in the CBA necessarily, so it's a little bit of a,
I have to imagine to do all
Exercise.
of that by the time we have our budget hearing in 2 months from now would be difficult to do.
it would be a challenge.
How'd you guys do food service last year? You just raised the rates though, you didn't reopen the contract.
So, the association agreed to allow us to unilaterally increase, and so that was a whole different
Okay,
process.
that was the same issue, right? You couldn't hire food service workers because it was just way too low and.
Yep. And I think custodians
And
also.
maintenance,
yeah.
I think we opened both of those. But it takes trust with the association, and you have to be really specific, like, this is what our intent is. And then they have to agree to allow us to do it. So,
Other questions for personnel? Okay. I'm gonna pause. It is 8:55. We, as a reminder, we no longer have a hard stop at 9:30, but I certainly want to be respectful of everyone's time. My recommendation would be that we at least tackle SAU, school board, and transportation, as those are fairly simple. Not a lot to them, or not a lot of changes. And then that would leave us curriculum, special services, technology, facilities, and business for next Thursday. Is everybody okay with that?
It's still gonna be a lot.
It's still a lot, I know, but it at least knocks a few out. All right, so let's move to SAU.
So I'm going to combine SAU and school board because they're two very quick presentations. The SAU budget is relatively flat. You can see that it had an increase of $75, and that was due to the cost of our season pass. So our season pass accesses a whole series of PD that's available through the School Administrators Association, and we're predicting that that's going to go up by $75, so we wanted to make sure we incorporated that. Everything else is level funded.
Straightforward. Any questions for SAU, for the SAU? Okay, school board.
The school board budget is up by $3,100, and that is tied back to election services. And specifically, the cost of printing the ballots for the annual meeting and the voter information guide. Last year, we found that we needed to issue a supplemental guide because of misinformation that was being circulated on social media, so we needed to make sure that we got the story out, so that did result in an extra expense. So we just want to make sure that we're prepared, again, should that happen.
Do you split that with the town?
The cost of the voter guide is split with the town.
Questions for the school board budget? Okay. Transportation.
Maybe I didn't do a transportation slide. Transportation is really just, it's contractual. So we have a contract with First Student to provide transportation services. That contract had a 3% increase, and that's what you see presented to you. And this is actually the final year of the contracted rate with them, the final year of the contract with them, so the 5th year. And we'll be looking to either go back out to bid or renegotiate, probably coming this summer, so that we can plan for the year after that.
So each year it's gone up by 3%, and if you look at kind of the cost of gas and as well as the cost of employment, it's really been a good bargain for the district. I don't see it going up by 3% when we have to renegotiate. There's no way that they're not gonna wanna get some of that money back. But next year, we're in that lucky spot where it is only going up by 3%.
So there was a question at the meeting with the school board about a ridership count and evaluating the number of buses that would be needed. Has that been done?
So that's we meet with the school bus company every month, so we communicate through email, and that's on our next month's agenda to talk about.
So next month, but we're doing budgets now.
It wouldn't
There-
impact this one though, because
Well,
it's a
okay.
contract, right?
You can get ridership though, right? Have you already had ridership?
No, I mean, but there's no reason you can't reduce it. If it makes sense to reduce a bus, you could reduce a number of buses. We've done that in the past.
I don't see how you can with the elementary school. Our bus doesn't get to our house till like 45 minutes to an hour after
But that doesn't
school.
mean other schools couldn't. So it was a request that was made at the school board, and I think it should be something that's factored into the budget review.
All right, can you make sure that question's on?
Ridership and evaluation
they
of
can
bus
get
runs, is
ridership.
that it, Carrie?
Yeah, because the question was evaluating the number of buses.
Right.
Whether, maybe it demonstrates we don't cut, but the question's been asked, we should have an answer for it.
Judging by the feedback that I've heard from the public as far as the times for these buses getting picked up and then dropped off.
What is the long time? Like what,
For like an elementary student?
Yeah.
Close to an hour?
Yeah,
Okay.
we could probably walk home, honestly.
No, I'm just curious because I know what I grew up with, and so my perspective of what is acceptable is very different than what's around here. So I'm curious as to what the
Yeah,
trigger point.
if my
at this-
kids took the bus home, it would be close to an hour.
Yeah.
And they,
You're only talking, you know,
the middle
going
school
like
and
2 miles.
yeah, the middle school and the high school runs were combined too,
Yep.
so that lengthened the bus runs.
My kids had an hour in the morning and an hour in the
That's what
afternoon.
mine was
Different
usually
district,
that.
but, you know, I also looked at it as daycare by bus, because we depended on that extra hour at the end.
It's a fun social opportunity.
Yeah, right.
So that things are different.
Let us
here.
work.
Yeah.
Anything else for transportation? I agree, it's a good, you captured that, Tara.
I just have ridership and evaluation of bus runs. If there's anything else, let me know.
Anything else for transportation? I'm gonna suggest we also do the business office, and that be our last one tonight, because that one, like the last three, is
You wanna stop there?
essentially,
There's transportation, it's on the
What was that?
business
Said you wanna
side.
stop there?
Huh.
I'm just thinking it's early, we could possibly do more.
I would love to keep going, to be honest. I'm not gonna be here
the
next
will of the
time,
committee.
so.
Has Mr. Taylor been able
oh, we
to?
voted that out, remember?
Yeah, we did that, but,
Yeah.
yeah, we got rid of the hard stop. I mean, we encourage being done at a reasonable time, but
So let's quickly go through business, and then we
I
can,
mean, if we
So
know
the-
that they're relatively easy to cover, that saves us
I mean-
more time for the
To-
more,
in fairness, one option is we go through the next 5, and we don't meet next week. So that is an option on the table as well. So if people wanna,
Motivational?
I think some of these are big, which means it could be past 9:30. But if we're willing to stay here till 9:30, 10 o'clock to not meet next week, I'm okay with that as well.
We've had a hard stop at 9:30 up till last week, and we've been here till 10.
I
That's
know,
why I made the
right?
motion to get rid of the hard stop. I mean,
if we spend 10 minutes talking about it, it's a waste of time.
So
Should we have next week though, so Mr. Taylor has that opportunity to follow up with some questions? Or
Just be able to
just
get back to you on the
submit
health
those?
insurance next week.
So it'd be
Yeah.
a short
It would just be a
meeting.
nice short
That is
one,
fair.
yeah.
That is fair. Yeah, Mr. Taylor will be here next week and was unable to be here because of work
he
travel.
can come
So
himself.
that's true.
Or you could add to the document.
You'll also have all the school board actions,
That's fair.
so,
There will be some action
That's
taken
true.
on Wednesday.
but if we don't have to go line by line or budget by budget, that would be helpful, so.
So let's
The
go to
business
business.
office,
Yep.
basically, movie licensing has been moved, out of this budget. So for whatever reason, it was in the business office budget, so it's now been parked out at the various school budgets. And so movie licensing means that if you're showing a movie that has a copyright on it, you have to make sure that you have paid the licensing fee to the organization that controls that. And so that is a decrease in this budget, but it's just been added out there. And then there's an increase in software costs that are included here, and that's relative to all the software that we need to run the school district. So our time clocks, our financial software, et cetera. So it results in a $4,527 increase, all said and done.
Questions for the business office budget?
Nope, I lied. It's a
It's
$2,986.
Okay,
I had to switch the page. I apologize.
No questions? Okay. If we're good, do we want to? I would recommend maybe we go to technology. Technology is not as deep as the other 3 that are left. That might be a good one to go to next.
So our IT director pointed out a couple of things that are driving this portion of the budget. So, remember, there was a reduction that he brought forward to the board of $16,500, resulting in an overall increase in his budget of $5,213. So the board did take that action, as he recommended. But basically included in here now that we've gone one-to-one Chromebooks, we are doing replacement Chromebooks in grades 5 and 9. The Chromebooks seem to be lasting about 4 years, so that allows every 5th grader to get a new device that they're expected to carry through 8th grade, and then they get a new device when they arrive at the high school. The lease numbers he has adjusted throughout the budget, so there were various software leases and so forth, and he wanted to make sure that they were reflecting actuals. There is an increase for software costs because the software needs have shifted a little bit, and so he did include a couple of ads like Screencastify and We Video were new ads into the software lines.
I think he took some of those over from Mary's budget, if I understood correctly,
I
too.
believe that-
They were trying to consolidate software into one place.
And it was one of those things that it's like somehow it got added into curriculum way back when and then just carried there, so we're trying to get it into one-stop shopping.
Yeah, you're right, that's, I had a note on that too.
The internet and phone costs, that's where he took that reduction because now that our telephone system is voice over internet protocol, VoIP, he was able to realize some savings by cutting some lines out, and so that's the cut that the board made. Teacher laptop replacement, so again, just like students, our teachers are on the devices all day long, they're bringing the devices home, and so making sure that we have a good replacement cycle for laptops for the teachers is part of his budget. There is a proposed lab replacement at Campbell. Campbell actually has 3 labs. There is the upstairs lab that Sean McDonough is in. There is a downstairs lab that Paula Berry is in, and there's also a lab that Dana Barassa is in. And so he is proposing to replace one of those this year. He hasn't identified which one, but you have to stay fresh with the labs and the devices that are there. He has shifted away from the projectors, and this came up on the tour last night, so we've had a lot of projectors in rooms, and we're shifting away from those to a panel like this. So it's much more plug and play and more streamlined. The projectors, I mean, the cost of a light bulb for a projector is almost the price of a projector, so
Almost the price of a panel TV.
our feeling is that the technology has just shifted in a way that this is where we should be paying attention. So this is what he's proposing to do. It'll result in some long-term savings. And then there's some infrastructure, switches and servers and backup devices that he just needs to make sure that he is investing in to make sure our system is robust and doing what it needs to do. So all of that is factored into his budget.
And with the reductions that, just to recap, the 16.5 that was reduced by the school board, that budget is now up $5,200.
5213.
Thank you. I did have a couple of questions, and one, Tara, just for you to capture in the spreadsheet.
Yep.
Chris and I actually talked about this as we were leaving one of the meetings. I think I brought it up as a question about were there opportunities in that software budget to leverage resources that were being provided at no cost through the state that had similar functionalities. And he and I had a parking lot conversation about that as well. I know he was gonna look into it, just to capture that question here, so everything's in one spot.
Did you have a suggestion on one, or was
Yeah,
it?
there was one, there was a,
Instead
there
of
was,
Screencastify,
it was
the thing
something,
on
it was a resource called Kaltura that the state provides, and it seemed to have similar functionality than Screencastify, and he said he was gonna look into it.
Perfect. So we'll get an answer for that.
The other question I had, and I think,
JD, if I may, just keep in mind, so this is the state's infamous plan. They provide it free of charge, and then they charge you down the road. And so I think we're gonna ask 2 questions on it. It's free now, what might it cost down the road? And if it costs more than Screencastify, in the long run, it may not be worth it, but just keep that in mind. We've seen over and over again where you get this thing for free, and then all of a sudden, it's no longer free, you have to pay for it. Now you got everybody hooked. So it's.
and that's a fair question to ask. In the conversation he and I had in the parking lot was, there'd been a lot of time and investment on professional learning for the current tool. And so depending on how much of a shift this was, and if it had a Chrome extension associated with it and so was it the right move? So I know he said he was gonna investigate it. I just wanted to make sure we captured it there.
Perfect.
My second question, I think this will be the 3rd year in a row I've asked this. For the lab that we're replacing at CHS, I know every student has a Chromebook. These labs that we're replacing, are they, what are the courses again that are being run there? And is the content and software that's being used there applications that can't be run on the Chromebook?
So my understanding is yes, because, and let me talk about the 3 labs. So the upstairs lab, we teach AP computer science courses. And I believe the demands way exceed what a Chromebook is able to do. But that's why we have that lab, and it does have specialized software on it for the AP course. The downstairs lab, one is sort of a digital art lab, if you would. And again, I think there's more sophisticated software on that. The other one is the accounting room. And, there's a reason why the work I do is on Google Sheets and the work Doug does is on Microsoft Excel. Because he's pulling way more sophisticated numbers than I am. Sheets is fine for my work. He needs Excel. We need to train students in the Excel world because it is a more powerful, robust system. So then you get into, can a Chromebook run Excel? Probably, but you still have a more robust need for that software and the accounting tools.
That's
So-
helpful.
If you put it on all the Chromebooks, then you're incurring a per user fee for that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree on the computer science and the art ones. I know those are more robust. So, as a follow-up real quick, do our libraries still have standalone desktops in there?
There are a handful, but there are not many.
I'm not sure.
I think in Campbell, so when I look in, there was a table
In
with
the middle, yeah.
machines right in the center, so those I believe are still there.
Are those used at all? I mean, I have to imagine they're. My question would be, and I know it's not in this year's budget, but just to think about something down the road. If and when those machines come out of circulation, is there really going to be a need to replace them? If the tool that students are using to search books and check out books, if that can be done via the Chromebook, then that might not be a future replacement need.
Yeah, I think if we capture that question, we can have the librarians weigh in on that, because I don't believe there are devices in the middle school. We were just in that library
Yeah,
yesterday. I didn't see
I
any
didn't see any
devices in
either.
there.
Yeah.
And so what's in there is sort of that maker space, like the 3D printer. I think there's a device that controls that. And again, that's going to be more than a Chromebook.
Right.
So that could be the case at the high school also, but let's verify that.
You think it's
And
just
there's
CHS or LMS too?
I think it's the
Just
3
CH
library media centers,
all of them.
and
Okay.
I don't recall seeing any at Griffin, but they're.
They're in there.
Are
There's
they?
like 4, I think, but they just do little games and things on there.
but
The
they
Griffin's
also
different
pre-
because you've got younger kids that don't have Chromebooks that they're taking home, so I could
Right.
at least see that one.
But the
CHS.
devices in the library, I think, predated Chromebooks in the classroom. So
Probably.
you're raising a good question. So what is that need? going
CHS would be
forward?
more the place that I'm thinking of, where every kid does have a device, and that they just may not be necessary down the road.
So another possibility too would be to take the labs that are coming off and use some of those computers in the library as well.
Exactly.
And that's what my last district
true.
did, so.
I agree.
So one question would be, if one is accounting, one is digital software, and one is AP computers, what is the usage of those rooms? Is there any way to consolidate into 1 or 2 labs as opposed to 3 separate labs?
Based on course.
But based on course
scheduling?
load and scheduling, if there's 1 or 2 classes of each, do we truly need 3 labs?
Let me ask that question, because the upstairs lab is used heavily.
Which I think is awesome. Being married to a computer engineer, awesome. I'm glad you guys have that. But
Well, out of 8 periods, there are classes in there 6 periods. But that means there are 2 periods where another class could be in there.
right, but are they actually using the computers for the purposes that we have them for? Like if they're using it for 2 periods of computer science and the next one they don't actually need them for, then can
They're
we
not
just-
using the higher end software.
Right. So do we actually need 3 labs? That would be my question. Have we evaluated the actual needs?
Let me, yep.
Do we truly need 3 labs?
Can we capture that?
Yep.
Let's go after that, because
That's a good question.
Because I believe in the past we had 2 labs. So when you say 3 labs, I'm like, oh, apparently we have a new lab. So maybe that's the
There-
computer
there've been-
engineering one.
there've been 3 that I've always seen, so,
Okay.
but,
Other questions for technology?
Yeah, I might be missing it, but where are the Chromebooks?
where are the
In each of the schools,
Chromebooks?
aren't they?
Yeah, they're at the school.
Oh, I made a note. I don't remember where they are.
There's like 6.
I did the
Right.
It's gotta be under
Yeah, so,
technology.
Brian, that was another change in this budget, so,
I just went through these pages like 4 times. I go, I don't see the Chromebooks.
no.
Why would they be at the school level?
They're, because then it gets properly charged back to the school, so they're in the school individual budgets.
And this year it was, so just LMS and CHS.
So
Every year.
GMS doesn't get a replacement? Any
The
replacement
GMS
products?
machines are, first of all, they're newer. They kind of came in as part of the pandemic, and they're also, they're not taking them home. Other than on a snow day, they'll ship them home for that event.
Is it more like onesies, twosies that are getting replaced instead
I
of?
think they filter down.
Yeah, my understanding that they filtered the ones from the high school and the middle school, when
That
they
are in
get new
good
ones,
shape.
they go through them and gut them, and all the good ones, then they'll like move them
Okay.
down if need be.
And they're in the room, so they just last longer.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, when you are shoving it in a backpack and tossing it on the seat, all that stuff. Let me explain it to people who have teenagers, you know what I mean. So,
Other questions around the technology budget?
Did you hire a new tech director?
so Chris Jamrog, so Jason Pelletier left us last fall.
Yeah.
And Chris came on
He's a new guy,
in
he's replaced that line, okay,
January, so he's a new person in that position.
okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Other
You know
tech-
me in new positions, so that's always my question.
Other technology-related questions? All right, if there's none, what I'm gonna recommend, because the three that we have left, curriculum, special services, and facilities, are probably three of the bigger ones and three of the ones with some of the biggest increases. And to respect and give Mr. Taylor the opportunity to ask questions around those, I'm gonna say we pause here. That'll leave us those three for Thursday evening, okay?
Curriculum, special services, and what was the other one?
Curriculum, special services, and facilities. Yep. Okay. And just to kind of close this portion of our agenda, so we have, it looks like we have 15 questions that are in our Google Doc that we captured tonight. And you shared that with your admin team, as I think you mentioned, Jen's already gone in and answered one of them. So, this has also been, I shared it with the budget committee right before our meeting started. So this is something that you all should have the opportunity to go in and check over the course of the next day or two, well in advance of our meeting on Thursday.
How do they get incorporated into the meeting minutes?
We can
That's one of
add,
my concerns, is like the whole RSA 91A, making sure that things are accessible. How do we make sure that those are available?
so when Matt, when you put together the minutes for this meeting, then let's just make this another page that's
Okay.
attached to those minutes, okay? So you might require waiting a couple of days to give people time, because I wanna make sure we capture those answers too.
Slow him down.
I know. Too fast. All right. We're gonna move on to our agenda. Any general updates on the school side that we haven't talked about already this evening?
Just a thank you to the budget committee members who attended the LMS walkthrough yesterday. There will be another opportunity, that I'll make known once it's scheduled. You're able to see just a lot of progress, so, thank you.
So I had sent some follow-up questions 2 weeks ago, regarding the LMS project. I was curious as to whether or not we've seen any responses to any of those questions.
There's been partial responses that I've seen, but not fully, so I will ask Miss Dr.
Are you talking about the ones you sent this week?
Yes.
Well, there was, I think I sent them 10/27, the follow-up questions to LMS, I think is what the time is on mine.
Oh, I know.
We didn't meet last
I know
week,
what
so I
you're
can
referring
ask,
to.
right?
You're referring to.
The LMS
The
project
follow-up,
questions.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're all
so-
noted, they're all in the queue.
All right, so we'll put it on the task list that there are questions that are still outstanding.
They were expanding upon some answers that were provided.
Yes, exactly.
So we have provided some answers, but not all. And some of it,
So some of those, like, I understand we want to do this document, but I think there needs to be a way to return the answers in a more, the way, like, so that they get into the meeting minutes, so that they're part of the conversation, because the public doesn't necessarily have access to that. I understand it's a working document, it's great for that purpose, but the reality is, it still needs to be sent electronically or in some way so that it gets captured into correspondence, it gets a document. I know you guys like it, I'm not a fan of it because I think it gets lost.
I do capture your questions in
What?
correspondence,
Because every
but not the
question-
answers.
Right.
All right, I'm not clear what you're saying, because every set of questions that you've had thus far, I've emailed.
Right.
So are you saying those don't
No,
get
I-
into minutes?
I did get those, and I
Oh,
do think
okay.
they go in, but there was an indication that some questions have been answered and others are not. So anything
Well-
that's been answered,
You haven't
Haven't
seen
seen
it.
it, okay.
Exactly. You have
Alright.
not seen it. It hasn't
Perfect.
been answered verbally. I just.
because if you're expecting me to
I
check
saw-
the Google Doc, I'm
well,
not
I
doing
can
that.
see them answering some of them, but I'm like, this is not done,
Okay.
so
You
I
do
didn't
raise a-
send it yet.
You do raise a good point that we aren't doing, and that is capturing those in the meeting minutes somewhere. So I just,
Which is why I brought it up, because I know how awesome that task list is.
yeah, let's talk after this meeting about maybe the best way to do that. Any other questions for the school? Okay. Mr. Leary, updates from the town.
Elections Tuesday, had a fantastic turnout, one of the highest I've ever seen.
4,400, I think is what I saw.
I think it was a little less than that, but it was about two-thirds of the vote, of the people that are eligible to vote were there. It was very good turnout. Hey,
That's awesome.
it is, it's great, democracy in action. And, you know, I had several discussions with people there. My thing was, doesn't matter how you vote, matters that you vote, even though
Right.
people had different opinions. You know, it was a great turnout and a good day for the town. It was a really nice thing to see.
Yep.
Other than that, we haven't met in a while, about 3 weeks. We'll meet Monday. And we'll have updates. I was just looking at the agenda so I could see if there's anything that I need to report, but not really. Not yet.
Any questions for Mr. Leary on the town side?
I actually have one. I'm thinking about it coming in. Why do we have, I know we talked about cable TV in the building, and that's why we heat the fire department so they can use the toilet. Why do we have a cable TV station? When everything can be broadcast on YouTube, and basically all the meetings are broadcast on YouTube?
Because some people have cable and don't do the internet,
How many?
and it's a source of revenue, so, I mean, we get money from the cable company. It's a self-funded program.
I think, Mr. Brunel had said that it pays for all the salaries and everything
heard
for
too,
everybody
yeah.
that works.
Which there's
um,
quite a
to even get the
pool of-
YouTube up.
There's a
The cable company pays for that,
balance in there.
What they pay.
I don't think I've ever watched a meeting on YouTube TV.
No.
I have.
I've watched a few. It's funny.
I forgot about the fact that it pays for their salaries. But I was just, because
Yes.
everything's on YouTube, it's like every meeting.
Without the group, there would be no YouTube TV.
I understand. So it's answered my question, thank you.
Perfect.
It doesn't have to go on a task list.
Did you notice that your light bulb was taken care of?
Yeah, it's off.
It's supposed to be on a timer now.
Daylight
And the
savings.
timer's
You need
timed
to give
yet.
him the key so he can turn it on and off.
We'll see if it's on when we
Remote
walk in.
controlled from your
Get your
house.
remote.
Christmas lights are still up though.
If it's off when you walk by, just go.
Clap on, clap off. Yeah.
Anything else for Mr. Leary? All right, any member input new business this evening? Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thursday.
Thank you.
I mean,
Any member input new business?
so as a follow-up of like things that are being captured, I had sent a follow-up to, after the town meeting where we had, well, the meeting with the town lawyer, and there was a discussion about the lease of the school, and so after a follow-up to the school board meeting, I sent a question with regard, a couple of questions that are still outstanding. So I think that actually falls into the town, right? Town getting a response with regards to legal?
You did ask that, and just, yeah, in transparency, Ms. Douglas asked a question 2 days ago, as a follow-up from our conversation, I forget the date of it,
The last budget meeting.
27th?
the 27th, yeah, when Laura was here as town legal. She had some follow-up questions that were associated with that. At the time that you had sent those questions over, there had already been some dialogue on the town side as some of those questions were being asked. So I think, in full transparency, I have received no information back that's any of those questions have been answered.
Perfect, so I'm just saying the town can be put on the task list of something to follow up with.
And there, and I will say, whether it's Mr. Weber, Mr. Leary, or Ms. Kleiner, as soon as they get information, it's usually in my inbox right away.
Excellent. You just don't want to see your name on that list for a couple of meetings, that's all.
Any other member input, new business? Okay, public input. I will open it and I will close it and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
I have a motion and a second. All those, I have a motion by Ms. Douglas, second by Mr. Leary. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Our meeting is adjourned. We will reconvene next Thursday, 17th at 7. Thanks, everybody.